Family betrayal hurts deeper than any stranger's insult. And when it comes from the people who are supposed to protect you, it doesn't just leave scars, it leaves a fire burning inside. This is the story of Ava, a quiet, awkward girl who was treated like a problem instead of a person. Her parents always favored her brother. Her aunt always had something cruel to say behind a tight-lipped smile. And that day at the station? That wasn't a mistake, it was a message. They didn't want her anymore. But what they didn't know was that the girl they abandoned would come back, not with anger, not with revenge, but with an empire built from everything they said she could never do. This is the story of being underestimated and becoming unstoppable. The train platform was unusually quiet that morning. A thin fog clung to the air like a secret no one wanted to speak aloud. Ava stood near the edge of the concrete, her hands tucked tightly into the sleeves of her jacket, her suitcase beside her feet. The station clock read 6:43 a.m., and the train was due to arrive in 17 minutes. She scanned the platform. No sign of them yet. Her family, always late, always in a hurry, and always too loud for public spaces, had insisted they all take the early train to the coast. It was meant to be a short getaway, a farewell vacation before Ava's older brother, Calvin, left for his new job in Chicago. Everyone had made a big deal about it, decorating his luggage with ribbons, writing cards, even throwing a surprise brunch the day before. Ava had quietly packed her own bag. She was used to being the shadow in the room. At 22, she still hadn't found her thing. Calvin had always been the golden child, sports trophies, scholarships, charm. Ava. She was the smart but weird one, the kid who drew in notebooks and couldn't maintain eye contact for too long. Her family said they supported her artistic spirit, but their eyes always said something else. She checked her phone. No messages. No missed calls. It was cold. The kind of cold that bit through denim and turned silence into something sharp. She heard the whistle of a train in the distance. Still no sign of her mother's curly hair, her dad's oversized coat, or Calvin's obnoxiously bright duffel bag. Then her phone buzzed. A text from her cousin, Mallory. "Hey. Sorry. Train's full. We left early. Thought you'd catch the next one. Safe travels." Ava stared at the screen. She blinked, read it again. "Train's full?" She scrolled up. Nothing. No warning. No calls. No goodbyes. Her chest tightened as her heart slid down into her stomach. She looked around again. No cameras. No prank crew. No surprise. They had left her. They had actually left her. Steam engine, the memory that wouldn't leave. For a long time, Ava stood still. The train roared past her moments later, their train, her family probably sitting in comfortable seats, sipping overpriced coffee, maybe laughing about how dramatic she was going to be when she found out. She couldn't cry. She couldn't scream. She just stood there. The platform emptied. The fog lifted. But she didn't move. Because that wasn't just a betrayal. That was a message. A message that said, "You don't belong." A message that said, "We're moving on without you." When the next train finally came, Ava didn't board. She turned, picked up her suitcase, and walked back into the city. She had $86 in her wallet, a sketchbook, and nowhere to go. But she also had one thing they'd never understand: resolve. Cityscape hash a year of silence. Ava vanished from their lives that day. Not literally, she answered texts, liked photos, showed up for birthdays, but something had snapped in her. Something permanent. She stopped arguing when her parents made backhanded comments. She stopped defending herself when her brother called her soft. She stopped explaining her plans, her passions, her hopes. And she started building, quietly. She moved in with her art school friend, Naomi, who shared a one-bedroom apartment above a greasy diner. Ava worked at the register during the day and spent nights on her friend's second-hand laptop learning everything she could about design, branding, and digital art. Her first freelance job paid her $50. Her second paid $120. By the end of the year, she was making more than her parents knew. But she didn't tell them. She let them think she was struggling. Let them whisper. Let them forget her. Opportunity in disguise. It was an old train operators forum that changed everything. A former rail company designer was looking for help branding a new luxury transit line for upstate travel. Ava responded with a mock-up that she'd drawn in 2 hours, half asleep, with a broken stylus. The man replied with 3 words, "We need to talk." What started as a logo gig became a full branding contract. Then came the investor meetings. Then came introductions to 2 private equity firms who were funding rail innovation across the Northeast. Within months, Ava had gone from freelancer to creative director. The money rolled in fast. Too fast. But she didn't waste it. She didn't buy shoes or bags or fake friends. She bought stock. She bought shares. She bought silence. And when the board meetings came, she sat quietly in the corner, the youngest face in the room, drawing in her notebook as millionaires discussed acquisitions and mergers. Until one day, the discussion turned to an abandoned route. One that ran from the city to the coast. One that hadn't been profitable in years. Ava didn't hesitate. "I want it," she said. The room fell silent. "Excuse me," one of the directors asked. "I'll buy the route. I'll redesign it. I'll rebrand it. I'll own it." They laughed. But the next month, Ava signed the paperwork. Railway track full circle. It was exactly 5 years, to the day, since her family left her on that platform. The station hadn't changed much, still grey, still damp, still humming with the ghosts of early morning trains. But this time, she wasn't standing alone. She stepped off the new Ava Line Express, a sleek, modern train that now bore her name and was greeted by cameras, press, and a small brass band playing soft jazz. The station had been renovated. The benches. New. The walls. Covered in murals. Her murals. She turned toward the platform entrance just in time to see her parents walk in. They had received VIP invitations. Calvin, too. They thought it was some kind of community event. Free wine. Local celebration. Nothing major. Until they saw the posters. Until they saw her name. Until they saw her walking out of the conductor's cabin with a keychain that read. The crowd around the renovated station was buzzing, media outlets adjusting camera angles, journalists scribbling quotes, passengers snapping selfies beside the glistening silver and emerald-colored train now labeled Ava Line. The platform, once overlooked and forgotten, had become the epicenter of curiosity and admiration. But in one quiet corner stood her family, unaware they were about to walk into the story they had abandoned years ago. Ava watched them from the elevated control booth, a glass-walled box overlooking the station like the captain's deck of a ship. Her assistant, Jonah, stood beside her, headset on, tablet in hand. "They're here," he said, eyes flicking to the live feed from the entrance. "You sure you want them seated in the VIP car?" Ava didn't hesitate. "Yes." Jonah raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Your call, boss." Ava turned back to the window, watching her mother scan the station, clearly confused. Calvin was already filming a video for his social media. Her father squinted at one of the large posters on the station wall, an abstract mural of a faceless girl standing alone at a train platform, suitcase in hand. The caption below the mural read, "She wasn't left behind. She was left free. Admission ticket # the seats they didn't earn." The inside of the train was a reflection of Ava's mind, quiet elegance, purposeful design, and beauty in unexpected details. The Ava Line wasn't a luxury train in the traditional sense. It was more than high-end, it was curated. Each car told a story, each color chosen to reflect a theme: recovery, reinvention, power. Ava had poured every betrayal, every insult, every lonely night into the design. It wasn't revenge for her. It was therapy, sculpted in steel and velvet. Her parents and brother were guided to Car 3, the visionary lounge. They still didn't know. Calvin, ever the extrovert, filmed himself reclining in the buttery leather seat. "Yo, this is the kind of thing I deserve, man." Finally, some recognition, he said to his 8,000 followers. Ava watched it all from her monitor. She smiled. Recognition? He had no idea. Station the flashback she couldn't shake. Even as she prepared to walk down and greet them, her mind pulled her backward. Back to the girl standing on the station platform, watching her family's train disappear, feeling the walls of self-worth crumble around her. She remembered the moment clearly, how she had wanted to scream, to beg someone to come back. But no one did. Not then. Not in the weeks after. Not even when she confronted them at Thanksgiving. "It's not that deep, Ava," her mom had said. "We figured you'd understand. You always overreact," Calvin had added. It was just a train. But it wasn't. It was a statement. And she had taken it personally because they had made it personal. And now, as the train prepared to depart, this time her train, she wasn't just remembering. She was reclaiming. Megaphone announcement from the owner. The speakers on the train crackled softly. A warm, composed female voice filled the cabins. "Welcome aboard the Ava Line Coastal Express. This ride is more than a journey, it's a story. A reminder that some trains may leave without you, but the ones you build yourself never will." Passengers clapped lightly, intrigued. In car 3, Ava's father sat upright. "Did they just say Ava Line?" Her mother frowned. "That can't be our Ava." Calvin laughed. "No way. I mean, Ava couldn't run a food truck, let alone a train line." They didn't know the conductor had just received a radio message. "Owner boarding. Prepare car 3 for welcome. Open door." The door opens. The doors to car 3 slid open with a soft hiss. Ava stepped in, wearing a long emerald coat, black tailored slacks, and a quiet fire in her eyes. Her posture wasn't arrogant. It was assured. She walked calmly past rows of passengers, many of whom looked at her with curiosity, others with admiration. Then she reached her family's booth. Calvin's phone dropped into his lap. Her father blinked. Her mother's lips parted, unsure whether to smile or apologize. "Ava," her mom finally asked, hesitant. Ava said nothing for a moment. Just looked at them, one by one. Each of their faces frozen in a cocktail of confusion, guilt, and disbelief. Then she finally spoke. "I see you made it on the train this time." The silence was absolute. Cold civilities. What is this?" her father asked. "What's going on?" "This," Ava said, gesturing around, "is my train. You're on it because I let you be." Her mother's face flushed. "You run this?" "I own it," Ava said simply. Calvin scoffed. "Since when?" Ava tilted her head. "Since you left me on a platform and gave me the freedom to become someone you never imagined." She turned slightly, allowing a server to place 3 custom-printed envelopes on the table. "These are your seats," she said. "For the full journey. First class. No need to thank me." Her mother reached for hers with trembling hands. Calvin looked like he'd swallowed a stone. As the train glided along the coast, Ava sat in the observation car, alone. Glass walls offered panoramic views of waves crashing along cliffs, seagulls dancing above the water, and lighthouses that stood like sentinels of forgotten things. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She didn't feel triumphant or bitter. She just felt done. She had nothing left to prove. No point to make. They had seen her now in her full power, in her peace. Whatever came next was their burden. But Jonah entered with a hesitant look. "Your brother just posted a video," he said. Ava raised an eyebrow. He tagged the train. Said, "So proud of my little sister's train line," knew she had it in her. Ava laughed, bitter and quiet. "Let him have it," she said. Let him eat the crumbs. The Ava Line snaked along the coastline with measured elegance, its chrome gleam catching the golden sunset. Inside, however, turbulence brewed not from any mechanical fault, but from the awkward silence hanging like a storm cloud in car 3. Calvin had finally shut his camera off. Their mother sat with fingers clenched around a complimentary champagne glass. And their father, once the voice of authority in every family decision, now sat quietly, staring at the floor like it could offer him dignity. None of them had expected this. None of them had prepared for this. Ava had learned long ago that family doesn't always come through. But sometimes, they come back when they need something. A sharp knock tapped against the sliding door of Ava's private compartment. She glanced up from her tablet, where she'd been reviewing next quarter's expansion proposal. Jonah peeked in. "Your family's asking to see you. All 3. She looked at him for a moment, expression unreadable. Send them to lounge car 1, she said. Jonah tilted his head. The one with no cameras? Ava nodded. I want to hear their truth, not their performance. Lounge car 1 was intentionally quiet and dimly lit, designed for introspection more than entertainment. No Wi-Fi, no cameras, no distractions. Just cushioned seats, soft jazz playing, and a view of the sea through wide panoramic windows. Her parents and Calvin were already seated when Ava walked in. Her mother stood first, offering a hesitant smile. You look beautiful, sweetheart. Ava's face didn't change. Is that the opening line? Compliment first, then guilt trip. Her mother sat down quickly. Calvin leaned forward. Look, we're not here to fight. This is insane, Ava. You own a whole train company now? I do, she said flatly. Her father cleared his throat. We're proud of you. Ava finally took a seat opposite them. No, you're surprised. Pride requires faith. And you never had any in me. They tried, in their own fractured ways, to explain it. Her father talked about tough love. Her mother leaned on miscommunication. Calvin, ever the opportunist, talked about how he always knew she was a fighter, even if they didn't say it out loud. But Ava wasn't moved. Because their words didn't match the memories she carried like luggage across the years. They hadn't called when she was sleeping on a friend's couch, trying to rebuild after losing her job. They hadn't shown up to her first gallery showcase, even after she begged them. They hadn't even remembered her birthday the year she opened her first co-working space. No. These weren't people giving her an overdue apology. These were passengers trying to buy a last-minute ticket on a train they never believed would leave the station. Ava reached into her handbag and pulled out a sleek, white folder. She slid it across the table. Calvin opened it and immediately groaned. What the hell is this? Receipts, she said. Screenshots. Messages. Dates. Proof. Her mother looked pale. Her father's jaw tightened. You've been keeping track, her mother asked. No, Ava said. I've been healing. But healing means facing facts. She stood. I'm not here to make you feel bad. I just want you to understand that this version of me, the one running a train line, is not your doing. It's in spite of your doing. Before she could leave, her father finally spoke in a quiet, strained voice. You really hate us, don't you? Ava turned slowly. I don't, she said. Because hate requires emotional investment. I let go of that years ago. And with that, she walked away, heels clicking against the polished floor like a judge's gavel. Later that night, as the train glided through a forested stretch of the inland route, Jonah entered her suite with a hesitant look. You need to hear this, he said, holding up his phone. He played back a voicemail left by her father, intended for her mother. We should have done better. Not just today. From the beginning. I thought pushing her away would make her stronger, but I think we just made her cold. She deserved more, he said. She deserved family. Jonah paused the recording. Ava didn't say anything. But her fingers tightened around the edge of her chair. The next morning, the Ava line arrived at a major city hub, one where hundreds of guests, press, and local leaders waited on the platform for a speech from the owner herself. Ava stepped out in a cream-colored blazer, power radiating off her like heat waves. She stood before the crowd, microphone in hand, as banners bearing her name fluttered behind her. But in the second row, just behind the cameras, stood her family. And this time, they were the ones watching from the sidelines. This train isn't just a journey, Ava said to the crowd. It's proof that being abandoned doesn't mean you're defeated. That you can turn isolation into independence. That sometimes, the people who leave you behind are the very reason you fly. The applause was thunderous. Ava didn't look at her parents. Didn't look at Calvin. She looked ahead, toward the horizon. That night, the Ava line stopped at a small town station, quiet, calm, and familiar. It was the very place she had once been left behind. Jonah stood by the door. We're stopping here. Ava nodded. She stepped onto the platform and just stood there, breathing in the same air that once choked her with grief. But it felt different now. Heavier, and yet somehow lighter. Behind her, she heard footsteps. It was her mother. I just wanted to say, she began. Ava raised a hand gently. You don't need to say it. Her mother blinked. Why not? Ava turned to her. Because I don't need it anymore. And with that, she stepped back onto the train, this time by choice, this time in control. The door closed. The train moved. And the station faded into the night behind her. The Ava line glided across a snow-laced valley, its sleek body slicing through the chill like a silver arrow. Inside the executive suite, Ava stood in front of a wall-sized screen reviewing market data. Her COO, Liana Ortega, was mid-sentence. We just secured priority routes from 4 new provinces. That'll give us full coverage across the western sector. Ava nodded, her tone crisp. Good. Now push for exclusivity on the border region. If they want first-class infrastructure, they need to commit. She moved like a tactician, precise and focused. The Ava line was no longer just a train, it was a revolution in transportation. Her name was no longer just hers, it was a brand, a threat, and a promise. Jonah entered, holding a sleek black folder. His face said everything before he spoke. They filed for emergency liquidation. Ava didn't even need to ask who. Her father's logistics company, once dominant, now crumbling under poor leadership and outdated systems, was finally gasping for breath. Jonah placed the folder on the table. And there's more. Calvin reached out to me. He wants to meet. Ava arched an eyebrow. You're not serious. He said it's not for money, Jonah added quickly. Said it's about family. Ava scoffed under her breath. Family only comes calling when their house is burning down. For a brief moment, silence hung in the air. Not the kind that was empty, but the kind that weighed something. Ava finally spoke. Set the meeting. Neutral ground. My rules. The room nodded in agreement. Ava didn't owe them anything, but she knew power wasn't just built, it was maintained. And sometimes, keeping your seat at the table means deciding who's allowed to knock on the door. The meeting was scheduled in a glass-walled conference room inside a luxury business lounge at North Edge Station, a high-security hub Ava Line had recently acquired. She arrived first, as always, dressed in slate gray with a silk scarf draped like armor. When Calvin entered, his face carried the wear of sleepless nights and desperation poorly disguised as charm. Her parents followed behind him, slower this time. Less sure of themselves. Less proud. More humbled. Thanks for coming, Calvin began. Ava said nothing. Just gestured toward the seats. Her father tried to smile. It's a beautiful station. Very modern. Very, you. Ava nodded once. Let's get to it. Calvin cleared his throat. We're losing the company. You probably know that already. Our fleet is outdated, our creditors are circling, and the merger we planned collapsed. Ava's eyes didn't blink. That's unfortunate. Her mother leaned in. We were wondering if— No, Ava interrupted. Let me ask you something. When you left me at that station, when you called me useless, when you walked away, did you ever think you'd be here? Sitting across from the girl you threw away? No one answered. They couldn't. The air turned still. Ava leaned back. You think this is revenge? It's not. This is resilience. This is what happens when people stop waiting for a seat and build their own train. Calvin tried to pivot. Look, we messed up. We were arrogant, selfish, blind. But we need help. I need help. I'm not asking for a bailout. I'm asking to work with you. To learn. That surprised her. Calvin had always been the golden boy, the performer. And now he was sitting there, stripped of the bravado, looking more human than she'd ever seen. What would you even bring to the table? She asked coldly. Your company is bankrupt, your management style is obsolete, and your leadership record is, let's say, inconsistent. Calvin looked her dead in the eyes. But I know failure now. The kind that teaches. The kind that humbles. And maybe you don't need me. But maybe part of you wants to prove to the girl you once were, that she was always right to bet on herself. Ava sat in silence for a long while. Then she stood. I'll think about it. That was all they would get, for now. She walked out before any of them could speak. Because in this story, silence was no longer something done to her. It was something she owned. Later that evening, Ava sat alone in her private carriage, staring at a photo tucked behind her tablet screen. It was her, age 17, holding a journal in front of that same train station where she was once abandoned. Her hair was frizzed. Her eyes were tired. But she was smiling, just barely. Jonah entered quietly. "You okay?" She didn't look up. "Do you think helping them makes me weak?" Jonah didn't answer right away. "No. I think it makes you dangerous. Because forgiveness, when it's in your control, is the sharpest weapon you have." The following week, Ava held a press conference. Standing in front of journalists and flashing cameras, she made the announcement. The Ava line will be absorbing key routes from Orion Logistics as part of an infrastructure upgrade initiative. The transition will include training programs for displaced workers, modernization of cargo systems, and yes, some executive restructuring. She paused. "We believe in second chances. Not just for passengers, but for people, too." Her team clapped behind her. The cameras whirred. And Calvin, watching from the sidelines, nodded quietly. This wasn't mercy. This was evolution. Ava wasn't extending a hand because they asked. She was extending it because she could. Because the girl they once left at the station was now driving the train they couldn't afford a seat on. And maybe, just maybe, they were finally starting to understand who she had become. The Ava line hummed softly as it glided through the night. Inside her private suite, Ava sat cross-legged with a warm cup of jasmine tea. Her eyes scanned a thick folder Jonah had handed her that morning, an anonymous envelope delivered to headquarters with no return address. She hadn't planned to read it right away, but something about the handwriting on the note attached, it was shaky, almost desperate, made her pause. She doesn't know yet. But she will soon. Be ready. Ava turned the first page. It was a financial report. Old. From her family's company. But not just any report, it was a side deal Calvin had signed off on 6 years ago. A deal involving offshore accounts, unreported income, and shell corporations. It was fraud. And worse, it was criminal. The papers had Ava's father's signature on some forms, Calvin's initials on others. It had been buried under Orion Logistics acquisition documents. And somehow, someone thought she needed to see it now. She picked up her phone and dialed Jonah. "We've got a leak." "Internal?" he asked. "Doubt it," she replied. "But someone wants me to know what they did." "Why now?" Jonah was already processing. "Could be leverage. Or maybe a warning." Ava nodded slowly. "Either way, we keep it contained. Get Liana to double-check all contracts tied to Orion. No one signs anything else until I say so." Later that night, Ava met Liana in the boardroom aboard the Ava Line's HQ terminal, a floating conference hall that traveled with her signature train. Liana, sharp as ever, had already connected dots. The side deal was hidden using shell logistics firms tied to an old foreign investor. The crazy part? That investor tried to buy a stake in Ava Line 3 months ago under a different name. Ava's stomach turned slightly. So whoever this is, they're still active. Liana's expression hardened. And they're watching. The next morning, the headlines were worse. A tabloid had leaked the original financial report. The story was buried under celebrity gossip, but it was out there. "Train heiress inherits family's dirty secrets," the headline screamed. It didn't accuse Ava of anything, but the implication was enough to plant doubt. Her phone exploded with messages. Investors wanted clarity. Her board wanted answers. The media wanted a comment. And then, out of nowhere, her father called. She hesitated. Then answered. "You saw it?" he asked, voice tired. "Yes," she replied flatly. "I didn't know Calvin was hiding that. I swear." Ava let the silence do its work. "Why now?" "I don't know," he said. "But this wasn't supposed to be your burden." "It was always going to be my burden," Ava said, her voice a mix of steel and sadness. "Because you made me fight for every inch. And now that I've built something clean, they want to drag it into your mess." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I'm not the one you owe that to," Ava replied. And hung up. By noon, Ava had called a private board meeting. Her voice was sharp. The leak isn't the problem. The perception is. And we don't let them write our narrative. She laid out a strategy: launch a public transparency campaign, invite third-party auditors to confirm Avaline's clean financial record, and most importantly, pivot the focus. A new eco-friendly freight program would be unveiled within the week. The press would chase what she gave them. But behind the scenes, Ava was hunting. She had Jonah backtrack the source of the documents. Liana worked with cyberforensics to trace the email headers tied to the tabloid leak. It took 2 days. And when the answer came, Ava didn't believe it. The leak had come from someone inside the Avaline team. Not just anyone, Rhea Morgan. Her former best friend. Her old roommate from when she was still struggling to get noticed in her field. Rhea had joined Ava's company early on, helping set up PR and investor communications. Ava had trusted her, promoted her, defended her when others questioned her decisions. And now she was the leak. Ava confronted her in the HR conference room, alone. The door shut like a verdict. "Why?" Ava asked simply. Rhea looked down. "You changed." Ava's expression didn't move. "Explain." "You used to care about proving people wrong. Now you only care about proving yourself right. It was never supposed to be about destroying everyone else." Ava tilted her head. "So you sold me out to a tabloid? To teach me a lesson?" Rhea shook her head. "To stop you. Before you become the thing you swore you'd never be." The betrayal stung more than Ava expected. She had built everything from nothing. Carried her wounds like armor. And now she was being blamed for succeeding too well. "You're fired," Ava said quietly. "And if you so much as contact one Avaline partner, you'll hear from my legal team." Rhea didn't cry. She didn't beg. She simply walked out. Quiet. Like a ghost slipping back into the dark. Ava turned to the glass wall overlooking the terminal. Passengers walked across the polished floors, children skipping alongside parents, business travelers checking screens. The train that bore her name was preparing to depart again. Her empire was still intact. But something inside her had shifted. She wasn't sure if she felt more powerful or more alone. That night, she stood on the observation deck of her executive suite. The train streaked across the plains, lights glimmering like a comet through the countryside. Jonah came out to stand beside her. "She was wrong," he said. Ava didn't answer. "She thought you changed." "You didn't. You just stopped apologizing." Ava exhaled deeply. "That might be worse." He looked at her. "Maybe. Or maybe it means you finally became the person no one saw coming." And as the wind rushed by, Ava realized she didn't need their approval anymore. Only her own. 3 days after Rhea's dismissal, Ava sat in her office as the morning sun filtered through bulletproof windows. The damage had been largely contained. Her PR team worked overtime, flipping the narrative toward sustainability initiatives, philanthropic partnerships, and trailblazing innovation. The Ava line was once again trending, this time for expanding cross-border clean transport routes. But as she reviewed documents, her assistant buzzed in. "You have a visitor, someone who says you'll want to hear this pitch." Ava almost declined. But when she heard the name, she froze. "Tell him 5 minutes." The door opened and in walked Edward Langston, her father's old business partner. The same man who had once looked at Ava like she was a temporary inconvenience. The same man who stood silent when she was cut out of meetings. Time had aged him. His designer suit fit a little looser, and his confident smirk carried a trace of desperation. "I'll get right to it," he said, seating himself without asking. "You built something incredible. I can admit that now." Ava crossed her legs, her face unreadable. "This isn't a praise visit. Get to the pitch." He smiled. "Smart. I'm leading a coalition of private investors. We want to buy 40% of Avaline's upcoming freight division. You stay CEO. Keep creative control, we provide scale, global routes, air logistics. And you take nearly half," Ava replied, her voice flat. "It's the future. We can elevate this company to a level you can't reach alone. Not without leverage." Ava stared at him. She remembered being 17, standing outside her father's office, listening as Edward suggested they bring in real professionals to replace her experiments. Now he was in her office, asking to buy in. "I already reached that level," she said coldly. "Without any of you." Edward didn't blink. "Then imagine what you could do with us now." Later that evening, Ava sat with Jonah and Liana to review the proposal. It was slick. Financially smart. Strategically sound. But it stank of politics. The investors behind the deal had deep roots, old money, corporate boards, media influence. If she accepted, they'd boost her but also try to steer her. "Do you want speed or sovereignty?" Liana asked bluntly. Ava looked out over the terminal's skyline. "What if I want both?" "You won't get both from them," Jonah added. That night, Ava didn't sleep. She walked through the maintenance corridors of the Ava line, passing by sleeping workers, blinking systems, whirring engines. This was her city in motion. Built not just from steel and tech, but from fury, grit, and stubborn belief. She stopped in the dining car, where a single elderly man was sipping tea. He looked up and smiled. "Didn't expect to see the Queen of Rails walking alone." Ava chuckled. "Didn't expect to be called that today." He gestured to the empty seat. "Care to join an old conductor?" She Saturday. For the next hour, he told stories about the early days of freight, about narrow escapes from disaster, about how railways once defined the future. He didn't know who she was. Or maybe he did and pretended not to. As they parted ways, he said something simple: the train only follows two rules. Stay on track or build new rails. That line stuck with her. The next morning, Ava called a press conference, not for damage control, but for clarity. Standing on the same platform where she first launched Ava Line, she addressed a sea of cameras and reporters. "When I started this company, I was told I couldn't. Then I was told I shouldn't. Now I'm being told I'd be wiser to hand over the reins." She paused, eyes steady. "Let me be clear, Ava Line does not exist because of opportunity. It exists because of rejection. This train is powered by every door that was slammed in my face. And I didn't build it to sell it." The crowd erupted. But she wasn't done. "We will expand globally on our terms. And we're launching Ridgetrack, a sister line dedicated to cross-continental freight and sustainable supply chains. Fully owned, fully operated, no compromises." The investors were furious. Edward called her 4 times. She didn't answer. Instead, she focused on the next step. That week, Ava Line signed a major partnership with a Scandinavian logistics firm, allowing access to previously restricted Arctic cargo routes. The deal was cleaner, leaner, and kept Ava in full control. But power, as always, brought new problems. Ava began receiving messages. Anonymous tips. Hints that someone inside Ridgetrack was already leaking internal plans to competing firms. This time, it wasn't about family, or betrayal, or revenge. It was about corporate warfare. Silent, brutal, and personal. She knew it wouldn't stop. Because people like her, who refused to play by old rules, made enemies by simply existing. Jonah brought her intel. "Looks like a shell company registered in Belize is mirroring our freight blueprint. Same terminals. Same routes. Weeks before our public launch. Inside job," Ava muttered. Liana tapped her screen. "And we may know who. Remember Leo Kim? The contractor who worked with Rhea before her exit? He took a temp job with a logistics analytics firm. They just merged with that Belize holding company." The dots were there. But Ava didn't want revenge. She wanted something bigger. She launched an internal sting, planted fake documents on Ridgetrack's future East Asia route. A new route that didn't actually exist. Within 48 hours, that route showed up in a competitor's leaked proposal. Caught. She gathered the evidence. Made one call to the SEC. Let the corporations play by the old playbook. She'd just rewritten hers. And as the Ava Line thundered across another sunrise, Ava stood in the viewing dome, no longer questioning her path. They once left her at a station. Now she was building the tracks they all begged to ride on. Weeks passed like lightning. Ridgetrack's expansion plans were fully underway. Ava Line was no longer just a passenger service, it was becoming an ecosystem. A full transportation empire with energy hubs, freight corridors, community stations, and even mobile clinics in underserved areas. Every time Ava walked through a station now, children pointed at her like she was a myth. But inside, she knew the next wave was approaching. Ava had managed to outplay the corporate leaks. The SEC probe she triggered resulted in heavy fines and public embarrassment for a logistics firm that had tried to cannibalize her roots. Industry insiders started calling her the firewall for how airtight her counterplay had been. But Ava didn't feel like celebrating. Because now the media was shifting tone. Journalists who once praised her underdog story were now asking uncomfortable questions. Is Ava Line too powerful? Has one woman cornered the rail industry? From abandoned girl to monopolistic queen, where's the oversight? Ava knew the cycle. The media loves a rise. But it lives for a fall. At a board meeting, Jonah voiced the concern. They're coming for the throne, not with lawsuits, but with stories. Liana agreed. They'll try to paint you as a dictator, not a disruptor. Ava's fingers tapped the armrest. Her empire was solid, but her image? Fragile. She had spent years being underestimated, dismissed, and written off. Now, they feared her. And fear births narratives. The real trouble began when she announced her next project, the Horizon Loop, a massive, circular, international rail system that would connect cities across 6 continents through modular rail-to-sea-to-air integration. It was her moonshot. A legacy. But it scared the establishment. Major players in global shipping accused her of monopolistic ambitions. Unions, many of whom Ava had previously supported, were suddenly cold, their leadership pressured by lobbyists. Political committees began raising questions about her control over transportation infrastructure. In short, they wanted to clip her wings before she took off. One night, Ava sat alone in the central control tower of Ava Line's original terminal, the place it all began. The monitors glowed softly, showing every active line, every route, every heartbeat of her network. She remembered her first night there. A girl with a dream. A girl with nothing. Now, she had everything. And everyone wanted a piece. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock. It was her mother. They hadn't spoken much since Ava bought the train. She stepped in quietly, holding a small envelope. This came in the mail. Thought you should see it. It was a letter, handwritten. From her sister. They hadn't spoken since that day at the station. Ava unfolded it, expecting guilt or excuses. Instead, it was something stranger. Regret. Her sister wrote about watching Ava on television. About recognizing the train in the background, the one they left her at. About seeing the posters, the billboards, and realizing the face behind the empire was her. I didn't understand what you were, the letter read. Not then. But now, I see. You weren't just left behind. You were set free. Ava didn't cry. She smiled. Not out of vindication, but clarity. This was never about revenge. This was about reclamation. She turned to her mother. Do you regret it? Her mother sighed. Yes. But I think, you needed to build something we couldn't touch. The next morning, Ava called an emergency town hall, broadcast across every Ava Line terminal worldwide. She stepped onto the stage, not in a suit, not in heels, but in jeans and the old jacket she wore the day she was kicked off the flight. Her original uniform of rejection. I didn't come here to defend my company, she said into the mic. I came to tell the truth. She told the crowd how she started. How they left her. How the train wasn't just steel and circuitry, it was a promise that she would never again wait for someone else's permission. And now, she said, they want to tell you I've become too much. Too big. Too bold. But let me ask you this, how big is too big when the mission is connection? How bold is too bold when people need access, movement, opportunity? She let the silence hang before delivering the final blow. If they're afraid of what one girl with nothing became, good. Let them be afraid. The speech went viral. Not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. That week, public opinion surged back in her favor. A global poll found Ava Line had the highest trust index of any major transportation firm in the world. Politicians who had criticized her quietly backpedaled. Stock surged. Horizon Loop was green-lit. And Ava. She visited the station. The station. The one they left her at. It was rusted, abandoned, overgrown with ivy. But she walked the same path, stood on the same platform. Then she bought the land. She rebuilt the station. Not as a memorial, but as a launchpad. The new central point of the Horizon Loop. Every train from every country would pass through the place she was once left behind. The first day of its opening, Ava stood alone on the platform. A girl walked up to her, 8, maybe 9. She clutched a backpack, alone, nervous. Ava bent down. First time on a train? The girl nodded. Where are you going? Ava asked. The girl whispered, somewhere better. Ava smiled. Well, she said, standing up, you're on the right track. As the train pulled in and the doors opened, Ava stood back, watching the girl step forward unafraid. A circle had closed. Not with vengeance. With vision. Ava had achieved what no one thought possible. She didn't just change the rail industry. She redefined it. The Horizon Loop was now operational across 4 continents. Local economies once forgotten by global trade were revitalizing. Freight travel had dropped its emissions by 70%, thanks to her green energy lines. Cities once unconnected by infrastructure now thrived under her network. But progress has a cost. And success attracts vultures. It started quietly, murmurs within the boardroom. Executives asking for streamlined control of independent routes. Some pushing for privatization of Avaline's community programs, especially the mobile clinics and free student travel zones. They called it profit alignment. Jonah, her long-trusted COO, brought her the early reports. They're trying to carve the soul out of it, Ava. Ava's face stayed calm, but her fingers curled slightly under the table. She knew this day would come not from enemies, but from inside her own legacy. Then came the leaks. One anonymous whistleblower posted internal documents accusing Avaline of suppressing labor negotiations in the Eastern Corridor. The media, always hungry for another twist in Ava's saga, jumped at it. Has the revolutionary become the oppressor? From freedom to fortress, is Avaline too centralized to care? The headlines stung, not because they were true, but because she feared they could become true if she didn't act. She flew to the Eastern Corridor herself. No entourage. No press. What she found rattled her more than any accusation. Overworked staff. Lagging upgrades. A regional manager who thought he was untouchable. We thought you wouldn't notice this far out, he said smugly. Ava fired him on the spot, in front of every employee in the depot. Then she gathered the staff and sat down on the concrete floor beside them. We don't build empires on people's backs, she said. We build them with their hands. And I forgot that. She paused. Starting today, I'm launching Project Reset. Every division head answers directly to me for 60 days. Every region gets visited. No Zooms. No memos. Me. In person. The room broke into applause. Not just because she promised action, but because she showed up. Back at headquarters, Jonah and Liana worked around the clock to restructure the decentralized power model. New oversight panels were formed, composed of local community leaders, not just executives. Avaline wasn't collapsing. It was evolving again. But the attacks weren't over. A major investor, Byron Cole, who once praised Ava's vision, suddenly filed a motion to break Avaline into 3 companies, arguing antitrust violations and overreach. He framed it as a protect the public campaign. But Ava saw through it. Byron didn't care about the public. He wanted control. And if he couldn't earn it, he'd fracture it. So Ava went public not just in the press, but on live broadcast, during an Avaline town hall that aired globally. She held up the signed motion Byron had filed. This, she said, isn't about fairness. It's about fear. Fear of a system that works without greed. She turned to the camera. They didn't build this from a train station floor. They didn't sit with mechanics at midnight. They didn't scrape together steel and vision to unite broken cities. We did. You did. And I'll be damned if I let anyone take it apart just because they can't buy it. Her words hit like a freight train. Social media lit up with the hashtag, #SheOwnsTheTracks. Protests erupted outside Byron's firm. Within 72 hours, his motion was withdrawn. The message was clear: Ava Line belonged to the people now. But even victory felt complicated. Late one night, Ava visited the museum wing inside Ava Line HQ, built to honor those who had shaped the journey. Photos of her mother, her sister, even her first conductor, Jorge, lined the hall. At the far end, there was an empty frame. Jonah found her standing in front of it. "You haven't filled that one yet." Ava nodded. "It's not for me," she said. "It's for whoever comes next." He smiled gently. "Then maybe it's time to start looking." And for the first time in years, Ava considered the unthinkable. Stepping back. Not stepping away, but stepping aside. To make space for what comes after. She assembled a legacy council. Not handpicked heirs, but candidates from all walks of life: conductors, tech innovators, community organizers, even high school students who built mini-rail networks in underserved areas. She spoke to each of them not about profits, but about purpose. When the time comes, she told them, I want someone who remembers what it felt like to be left behind. Because they'll never let anyone else feel that way again. It was the beginning of her final project. Not a loop. Not a rail. But a handoff. A blueprint for leadership that never forgets the floor it rose from.